You're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network. We are the network dedicated to empowering the individual, illuminating the truth, defending American exceptionalism, and inspiring future generations. Stay connected and get involved at lanterns.buzz for great radio. Get commentary and news of the day. Lanterns.buzz.
Welcome, fellow patriots. Get ready for an hour of unabashedly pro-American, pro-conservative, and pro-biblical principles. This is the Blake Johnson Program.
60 million. That is the number I want you to fixate in your mind right now. The number 60 million. Along with the number 17. Now I know it's been a while. It's been almost a year since I've been in college, and it's been a couple of years since I've taken a math class. Thank the Lord for that. But I'm pretty darn sure, that the number 60 million is slightly bigger than 17. Not 17 million, because obviously 17 million, obviously, 17 million is bigger than 60 million, okay? We all know that. Not 17,000, that would be crazy. Not 1,700, but just the good old-fashioned number, 17. I'm pretty sure 60 million is just a bit higher than 17. I also, and I may be jumping out on a limb here, so if I'm wrong, feel free to contact me at LibertyVille93 on Twitter and say, Blake, you got this wrong. But I think the number 4 is bigger than the number 1. It's been a while. I'll have to get a hold of my old math teacher and ask her if that's correct. Now, 60 million, what does that number represent? What could it possibly represent? Let's say the number 60 million represents people, human beings. And the same for the number 17, represents people. Which matters more? 60 million people or 17 million people? Or 17 million. 17 people. My gosh, what a crazy number. 17 people. Which matters more? Well, you might say both, right? People matter. Okay, let's go with that. But which number do you think has a greater impact on society? 60 million or 17 people? I would say 60, right? I mean, all life matters, of course. But when you're talking about the greater impact in society, I would think 60 million is a big number. So, I mean, I'm just throwing this out randomly. Let's just say 60 million people are killed in, let's say, a war. Or let's say are slaughtered by their own government. Say in China, by their own leader. Would that be considered a big deal? Do you think the media would report on 60 million people being starved to death, being shot, being murdered by their own government? I would think so, even in today's world. What about 17? Well, if 17 people were killed, yeah, that'd be a big deal. But why, in this scenario, why are so many fixated on 17, but completely ignore the 60 million which have been killed in this country under abortion? And by the way, science has deemed that's actual life. You don't just have to be a Christian to believe that. Science says it. And liberals love science, don't they? Or do they? I can't seem to figure that out. Now, The media have been so fixated, and rightly so, on the 17 people that were slaughtered in Florida, massacred by this evil psychopath. And liberals all over the place are saying, we need gun control. We need gun confiscation. If you listen to that CNN town hall, which was more of a Roman Colosseum, that's what they were cheering for, mass gun confiscation. But nobody seemed to talk about the 60 million that have been aborted in the past nearly 50 years. Now, that to me seems like hypocrisy. It seems like inconsistency, especially when they say it's okay for those 60 million to be killed because women's rights. It's her body, you know. Reproductive rights. You can't invade that. But 17 children slaughtered, well, just over a dozen, technically, by a madman, well, that's the worst thing ever. And of course, it's awful. But can't we say that they're both awful? No, we can't do that. No, we can't do that at all. Now, let's go to the number 4. 4, I think, is bigger than 1. So, you would think, let's say there's a confrontation between 4 people on one side against this one person on the other side. Which one do you think has the upper hand? 4 or that one person? And let's say they're both armed. Let's say they both have equal protection. And they're both, one of them is specifically trained for combative situations. The other just wants to kill somebody. Doesn't matter if it's with a gun or with a bomb or with a baseball bat, it doesn't matter. But let's say those 4 people decide not to engage that one person who is slaughtering 17 people. Would you say that's a big deal? I would say yes. Well, as a matter of fact, that happened, as we found out in the past week. 4 police officers cowered in the line of duty while this madman went into a school and started slaughtering over a dozen people, and in the end killing 17 total, both inside and outside the school. And yet the media and the left seem to be fixated on the gun. Well, I don't recall the gun getting up and shooting those people. I recall it was that madman that did that. A madman who, by the way, was reported on 39 times by people that knew him, including a former roommate, calling 911. Reported on multiple times, and local law enforcement, the FBI, the school did essentially zilch to stop him. Nothing at all. But obviously we have to blame the gun. Obviously we have to blame the NRA. But if I'm not mistaken, just a couple of months ago, there was an incident in which somebody tried to shoot up a church in Texas, and a member of the NRA with an AR-15, if I'm not mistaken, stopped him by shooting at him because he was a good guy with a gun. And not just a good guy with a gun, but a good guy who took action and didn't cower behind a police car when he could have gone in and saved lives. And this sheriff, this disgrace of a sheriff who must resign, who must not be not just resign, but if possible, prosecuted for that. But no, let's blame the gun. Let's blame the NRA. The left is out of their minds crazy, bat crap crazy. And they're tearing away at our freedoms and our liberties every single day. Alright, one last thing. I want you, wherever you are, to close your eyes and picture in your mind the logo of Planned Parenthood next to the logo of the NRA. One of them sells arms, and the other defends the Second Amendment. Chew on that. The left the leftists, not just your average everyday liberal, but the leftists, the militant, radical, left-wing statist is hell-bent on tearing apart not just the Second Amendment, but the First Amendment, the 10th Amendment, which they've all but already done, and pretty much the whole Constitution, except for the one where you have to give the government money. Which I find it odd, because they claim that Donald Trump is a fascist, yet they want gun confiscation, and they want you to give your guns to him. That makes a whole lot of sense. Folks, we have got to stop listening to these people. High schoolers should not be dictating public policy. They don't know anything about how the real world works. They don't. I'm not saying that we ignore them. I'm saying we have to use reason and logic and fix them firmly in their seats. But we're not doing that. I'm going to be back on the Blake Johnson program, spending most of the rest of the hour talking to my good friend Jonathon Dunne. He's an Irishman who loves this country, loves America, and has studied it and has tried multiple times to become an actual citizen of this country, but our government has denied him. So we'll have a very thoughtful conversation with him. You don't want to miss a moment of the Blake Johnson program here on the Lanterns Radio Network. Stay tuned. Here on the Blake Johnson program, here on the Lanterns Radio Network. Great to have you here with us this hour. We have a very special guest. This segment, you may be familiar with him, especially if you are a longtime follower of Lanterns. His name is Jonathon Dunne. He is from Ireland, but he may as well be from America, considering how much he loves this country and has studied it. And he's been featured on the Glenn Beck program a number of times, telling his story. And I thought I'd bring him on the show today, talk about what's going on in this country and his thoughts about that. John, thanks for coming on the show. How you doing, buddy?
Doing good. It's an honor to be here.
Well, it's good to have you here. Tell us, for some who may be joining us for the first time, who may not have heard your story before, tell us some of your backstory on just who you are. And I know you've tried to come to America. You've tried to come here the legal way. Tell us some about that. Just tell us some about who you are.
Sure. So I'm Irish. I was brought up in Ireland, and as a young kid, I was very blessed to travel to your wonderful country about 25 years ago or more. I had an extended family over there, so I went to visit my aunt in Florida in Clearwater. Fell in love with it from day one, and then obviously I was a young boy. I fell in love with warm weather and beautiful women, different accents, culture, different sports, different food. Food's a big one for me. Just fell in love and was blessed to travel over several other times to it. And then as I became an adult, I learned more with the advancement of the internet. I fell in love with your country. But then as I read history, because I love history, and I found out, I started reading about your Constitution, I started reading your founding documents, I started reading what your founders actually said and why they said it. I fell in love with America, the idea. And I've always only ever had one dream as an adult, was to become an American. So obviously I tried the routes. For those that don't know, the most popular route is through something you've heard a lot of talk over the last year, is the lottery, which is basically you pay a fee and you get a number and you hope your number is called. It's the most popular way and probably the most likely way. I was never called. The other way is you get someone to hire you and give you a job and go through the legal process and get a work visa. I've always done different work. I've been a writer. I've been a public speaker. I am blessed with my show on the Blaze called Freedom's Disciple. I've done work with Lanterns. I was the head of radio. I worked with y'all and with Chris growing it. I've done work behind the scenes as a volunteer, in the hope that one day some person will come along and go, that guy isn't too bad. He knows his stuff. Let's give him a chance. Let's give him a paid job and let's get him over here. last February, just about 12 months ago, Glenn Beck offered me a job, which I was delighted about because Glenn's a personal friend, but he's also one of my heroes. And he offered me a job. We went through the process, and long story short, when we met with his lawyers and stuff and answered all the questions, I found out that I don't meet the requirements on two grounds. One is educational. I don't have a college degree. While I've done high school and I've done some college and I have diplomas in business, I have never done a degree, a 3 or 4 year degree program. And the second one was work experience grounds. Well, I do a lot of the stuff and have done a lot of the stuff I would have been doing for Glenn. It was always on a volunteer basis, never in a paid capacity. So they don't really count volunteer work as the same as actual work experience. So I didn't meet those two standards. So unless a miracle happens, my dream is dead. But even though it's dead and it's probably highly unlikely I get there, barring a miracle, my focus is still to help your wonderful country, because your country is amazing. Your idea is incredible, and it's an idea the world needs to hear. And quite honestly, the way America is right now is an idea Americans need to be reintroduced to. The ideas of freedom, limited governments, faith, family, freedom, and it's something I work very hard, and I'm very blessed with the outlets I'm connected to be able to do that.
I tell you, it gets so frustrating for me hearing about how difficult it has been for you to come to this country and be here. I mean, I would think, I'll just be honest, I'm not too familiar with all the aspects of trying to come here legally. I do know it's strenuous and it can take a long time for many people to try to come here the legal way. But I would think that, just the idea that you're doing volunteer work for people who are already in this country would be a really big motivator for them to say, hey, this guy, he's not just working for people in this country, he's doing it for no pay. I mean, to me, that's like the definition of a hard-working person who's willing to go out of their way to do that.
Oh, in an ideal world, you do lots of different things. I think America should be tough to immigrate to. The one frustrating thing I get is that the people who get rich in monetary terms off immigration is the lawyers, which is something I think isn't right. But, it shouldn't be easy. America is, to be an American citizen, to be there legally, it's not just something to be cast away. To be an American is an honor and it's a privilege. And as for me, it's, kind of the highest aspiration of an earthly desire I could ever want. That's how special you are. So it should be hard to get there. The frustrating thing for me is that you kind of have a double standard. On one path, you make it very hard for people to do things the right way, while no one ever focuses on them, but yet you have a culture which is rewarding people who do things who went, you know what, I'm just going to cross the border, or I'm going to do things the right way 1 or 2 times and get a visa, but then I'm going to overstay and I'm just going to be there. And because I didn't get caught, I'm now a dreamer. I'm now the most noble person that's ever been created. I'm even more noble than an American. I'm a special citizen. You can't dare criticize me. And yeah, I have some right to be an American. You got to make me. So that's the frustrating thing for me. It's not that you made it hard. It's you made it hard for people like me, but yet you're rewarding people who do things the wrong way.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I mean, that's another thing that's frustrating for me. Just seeing that go on, seeing people take advantage of our system, take advantage of our laws, take advantage of who we are, who we're supposed to be as a country, and then someone like you and many other people who try to come here the legal way, who really do want to follow our laws, who really do want to contribute, are essentially ignored compared to the ones who are just coming across the border illegally. And then now we're talking about giving them amnesty, giving them welfare benefits and all kinds of stuff that, I mean, really, to me, it's a deterrent for someone who is saying, well, why would I want to come to this place if they're not going to respect their own laws, Yeah,
it's frustrating, and I used to be very political. Political anymore, and I used to be the person who try and help candidates win, and I'd be the person who'd come to and say who's the most conservative candidate in the for a primary. And like I've been around conservative circles, and for one thing that I've never understood why conservatives don't actually highlight legal immigration as the solution. So like I've given conservative people on the Hill, I have a lot of friends, used to have a lot of friends on DC, not so much anymore because of what I say, and what I say isn't exactly popular in DC. But like when you remember when Obama had that dreamer in the State of the Union, he put him up with Michelle. I put out an idea to my conservative friends. I was like, and these are not conservative. I'm not talking about like the Mitch McConnells, Paul Ryan Republicans. I'm talking conservatives, and saying, why haven't you got like a legal immigrant to highlight their plight? That it cost them $10,000 or $20,000 and it took a year. This is the person we want, or someone who came here legally, went through the path, and now has a business and hires 10, 20 people to highlight. That's what you want. I've told people like Ted Cruz my story. I've met him, and he was sympathetic, but he's never made it. He's never highlighted not my story, but the principles of legal immigration. I know my friends at the Blaze have passed the information on to Mike Lee, and he's never spoken about too much about legal immigration. So what frustrates me is conservatives just lose this issue because you should be changed, kind of going, okay, you're for illegal immigration, no laws, just anyone can come. Well, we're not for that. We are for legal immigration. We're for a process. We're for doing things the right way, whereas they say nothing. It's kind of like, well, if you dare oppose illegal immigration and not offer a solution, you're just anti-immigrant, and you just give the Democrats a win, which is very frustrating.
It is frustrating. I mean, you said it yourself. What we really need to be doing, yes, we do need to address the problem of illegal immigration, but at the same time, we focus so much on that, but we don't focus on the people who are trying to come here the right way, and we don't prop up people enough who are showing the greatest example of what it means to really pursue the American dream. Instead, we're talking about people who have, violated the American way, the American law, and the American dream, and we're talking about rewarding them. And it's just, it gets so frustrating. And then, to top it all off, you hear people talk about how we as a country, we need to be more like Europe. We need to be more like countries, that have all these great big government welfare programs. We need to be more like them. And I'm sitting here as someone who has been born and raised in this country. I'm like, why are we doing that? We broke away from these places to be unique, to be a place, to be a safe haven for people who want to just pursue their dream the best that they possibly can.
Absolutely, and the sad thing is you're now seeing it from both sides, both of the political sides, which is incredibly sad from my point of view, and it's against everything I try and promote. You have people like Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton talking. Bernie Sanders will tell you what America needs is to be more like Norway and Sweden and the Nordic countries, and Nordic style socialism, and will tell you about how you need to be more like the United Nations, and then this week, I don't know if you want to talk about this, but this is actually teed me off a lot this week. You also have the CPAC going on this week, and you have people like Nigel Farage and Marine Le Pen addressing them. So it's almost like, CPAC, which is, I don't know if they lost this along the way, but the C in CPAC stands for conservatives, conservatism, and way of life. I don't know if they need to be told this again, but you see this, and it's almost like you have both. What we need to do is listen to Europe. No, you don't. Trust me on that. Of all the things, if you want to look at Europe, kind of go, yeah, we need to look at Europe and kind of go do the opposite, because then we might have a chance of getting it right. But ideally, look at what you have done. Look at America. Look at your principles. You're the one who, set the stage. You're the one who spoke about real freedom. You're the people who speak about nature's law. No one else does that. You're the people who has put a limit on government and system of federalism that no one else has copied. Europe likes to think it's copied it, but it really hasn't. It's just made it a king. It's not really a federalist system. You're the people who spoke about all men being created equal. Everyone loves to scoff at America overseas, and I say this to people. I'm like, where's your people? Yeah, America may never have achieved it, and we can talk about slavery if you want, but at least they have enshrined the fundamental principle that all men are created equal. So you mock America if you want to, but let's have an honest conversation. So what America, I believe, needs to do is go back to what made you exceptional. And if you do that, I still believe if you do that right now, your best days are still ahead of you. You have some magnificent days ahead of you. But if you keep going down this path of European and being like the rest of the world and just being average, You're just going to be another. You're just going to be another country, and America will be special and be nice, but you won't be exceptional. And that's what we need to talk to people about.
Well, it's good that you mentioned that. I want to take a quick break and come back, and I want to delve more into that. And I definitely do want to talk about the CPAC issue, and then talk about we got so much that is going on. And we'll talk about the gun control stuff that's going on. Get your thoughts on some of that. It's Jonathon Dunne joining us here on the Blake Johnson program. We will be right back with more. Stay tuned right after this. Program. We are continuing on with our conversation with Jonathon Dunne. He is the host of Freedom's Disciple on the Blaze Radio Network. If you want to check that podcast out, you can just go to theblaze.com/radio and you'll be able to find his show up there. I'd highly encourage you to listen to it. He's an Irishman who loves this country, has studied this country, and has a lot to offer in terms of just perspective on what makes this country so unique and so great. And John, we were talking before the break about just that, and the fact that this country is so unique and that it is truly exceptional. And I want to ask you, because I tell you, this week has been, at least for me, it's been really, it's been frustrating for me to watch so many of my fellow Americans just talk about America in such a very negative light and constantly bring up how terrible this country is. I know when the Black Panther movie came out like a week or so ago, people were talking about, some were talking about how good it would be to watch a movie like that. Others were saying, they're just constantly bringing up our slavery, our past, and constantly bringing up things that were not good, of course, but they talk about it in such a way as it's like we've never moved on, we've never grown, we've never progressed since then. So I'd like to ask you, and then add to that the whole gun control conversation that we're having as well, saying how we need to be more like Europe in regards to that. So I'd like to ask you, John, to talk to us about what makes America so unique, so exceptional. What makes us the greatest country on the face of the earth? Okay,
sure. So on the slavery issue, if you read enough of your founders' documents, you understand that people like Abraham Lincoln said that he would never have been able to stop slavery if it wasn't for your founding documents. You look at reason why the original writing of the Declaration of Independence, you all know it as life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. There was a reason that wasn't the original writing. The original writing was life, liberty, and property. What frustrates me is that people want to talk about slavery. And that doesn't frustrate me. I love talking about it because there's so much to be learned from it. What frustrates me is that you pick and choose of what slavery was good and what slavery was, we just ignore. So you look at the slave issue of America. Is there anybody you've ever talked to? Because I haven't. That has said, that slavery thing, that was a really good idea. We should go back to that. I have yet to meet the person who has even come close to that. Everyone says it's wrong. However, here's the frustrating thing for someone like me is, if you take the 400 years of the slave trade that everyone goes, that's really bad and that's wrong and America sucks for, and you add up every slave that was in that 400-year period, today there are more slaves than that 400 years combined. And what frustrates me is you have people in the media, people like on CNN and ABC and MSNBC, who love saying America sucks, and every chance they get, America's a racist nation, and the slavery was a bad thing, and America has never repented for its sins. Yet they are completely silent when it comes to today. They're completely silent on people like Tim Ballard with Operation Underground Railroad, who are rescuing kids from sex slavery. There are more people in slavery today than in that 400-year period. So is slavery bad? Absolutely. Is racism bad? Absolutely. I don't know personally anyone who thinks they're good things. And if they are, we'll have that conversation and change their mind very quickly, because the book has been written on this. But what frustrates me is we need to make the case of why America is exceptional. Every time, because you are an exceptional nation. There are some things that I would say make you exceptional. For me, because it's an idea, it's all about your founding documents, your Declaration of Independence, your Constitution, and your Bill of Rights. To understand why you're exceptional is to understand why you did everything that the rest of the world never did. You did the exact opposite. So little things like every other nation, in Ireland included, Britain, France, any nation that you think, past, present, or future, has set up their laws about the laws of man. And why that is important is everyone else goes, well, you know what? The law of man. Today, I think this is what I think today. But in 10 years from now, I might think something different. In 20 years, someone else might think something different. We'll evolve our positions. We'll flip-flop. We will change. We will grow. America was different. America said, no, we have certain laws. They're the laws of nature and nature's God. That these things are enshrined. They were true 2,000 years ago. They were true 241 years ago when you wrote the Declaration of Independence. They're true today, and they'll be true in 1,000 years. What are some of those things? Right to free speech, the right to freedom of assembly, the right to practice and worship your religion, the right to petition your government, the right of self-defense, the right to be secure in your persons and your papers, the right to a fair and speedy trial. These are rights. The second difference is you say these come from your creator. Every government, past and present, including Ireland, England, every government that you can think of, thinks they are the giver of rights. They think, oh, well, like, big issue, gay marriage is a big issue in the world right now. Everyone looks to the government and going, well, can you give us, the government, can you give us, I'm gay, can I have the right to marry? It's not the government's job. And America was different. America said, no, America government will be set up among its people to protect and to secure those rights, not to give them, but to protect them and secure them. Some other differences is federalism. Every other country started with someone figurehead at the top, whether it's a king or a queen or a monarch or a dictator or an oligarch or a theocrat or a president or a prime minister, and said, I am the top dog, I will have all these powers. And then the next body came in, maybe a parliament, said, we will look after everything else. And then the local communities, the local counties or states came and said, well, we have whatever's left. The power was always at the top. America is the exact opposite. America, I know you don't practice this now in D.C., America was founded was president is only a figurehead. He has very little power. The reason you gave him the title of president was because it was the lowest title you all could think of back in 240 years ago. Then you set up your system of Congress, where the House is the people's body, the Senate is the state's body, and you have Article 1, Section 8, which is 18 clauses of the enumerated powers. That is what the federal government does, and everything else belongs to the states. So instead of having power at the top, the power was always close to the people. They are some of the reasons why you're exceptional. And what has become of that? What has become of that is a country that has achieved so much in 240 years ago. I always say this to people, and it always annoys them. And I say, pick any part of society you want. Any part. I'm not going to guide you in any way. Think of any part of society. Whether it's food, whether it's agriculture, whether it's food storage, whether it's communication, whether it's standard of living, whether it is medicine, whether it is tourism, whether it is how you get to the local place to do your shopping, where you go shopping, how you do your shopping, whatever standard of industry you want. And think of just an arbitrary point of time of 0 AD. And think of the advancements that happened from 0 AD to 1800. That's 1800 years of advancement in your sector. Now, why is it that from 1800 to 2018, we have advanced so much more 118 years than we did in 100 years in every sector? Why? Because of two reasons. What I just spoke about, but also because you are a free person. You have the right to pursue your happiness, not a guarantee of happiness, but a right to pursue your happiness and a right to keep the fruits of your own labor. It empowered people to go, you know what? I don't have to live as a serf or a slave. I can have a better tomorrow if I play by the rules and I work hard. It is that idea of America that is the reason this world in 2018 is the world we live in. And by the way, this has benefited Americans, but it has also rubbed off on the rest of the world. And that is something we should always be grateful for.
Well, I tell you, that was a very, very good brief history lesson. Now, unfortunately, I'd be surprised if a good portion of the American populace could say much of the same thing that you did. But I tell you, you just do your own research, you do some of your own homework into this country, and you'll find there is a lot more good that this country has done compared to the rest of the world. I want to switch gears here. We've only got a few minutes left. I want to switch gears, and you mentioned this earlier about CPAC. You're talking, and I'd found out about this too. Normally you would think CPAC, Conservative Political Action Conference, would bring in conservative speakers. And last year they had this debacle with Milo Yiannopoulos, who was thankfully disinvited after some of the remarks that he was making on a radio program. Won't get into that, but needless to say, it was a good thing they disinvited him. And now this year they invite someone, Marine Le Pen, who, if for those of you who may have forgotten, part of the National Front group over in France, I believe, which has very deep and not so great ties to some pretty radical socialist, national socialist beliefs. And to add to that, you have other speakers on a different panel. I think Pamela Geller was one of them, though I think they got rid of that panel. From what I hear, I have to check into that. But you've talked about this on your social sites. Tell us why this is not necessarily the best choice for CPAC.
Because, what's frustrating to me is I thought we'd won, or not won, but these debates had been sorted. I thought a lot of conservatives understood that what to be conservative in America was not to be conservative in England, was not the same as to be conservative in France, was not the same to be conservative in Russia. Conservatism means many different things to many different people. The National Front right now, in Europe, you have a war going on that no one seems to want to talk about. And what you have is Russia, through the people like Alexander Dugin, who were funding people like Marie Le Pen. And it was the granddaughter of the founder of National Front, Marine Le Pen, who spoke. Conservatism, what means in France, means very different things than America. You think of just some of the stuff I've taught, and you think about some of America's founding principles. Look at what the Marie Le Pen and the National Front have stood for. You can look at their anti-Semitic past, you can look at their racist past, you can look at their bigoted past. Let's not even go there. Let's just talk about pure principles. One of the things they campaigned on in the last presidency was they wanted a tax code of a high rate of 46%. That doesn't sound conservative to me. Does that sound conservative to you? They talk about their country all the time, and this is the frustrating thing for me, is a lot of people over there support Brexit. They all think Brexit's a great idea, and that they thought it was great. I thought Brexit was a wonderful idea. It's been a thoroughly disappointment ever since, because what Europe does is you're going through this movement of, the country should control what happens within it. Absolutely, it should control it. It's international law. However, for me, I personally, if I have a tyrant ruling over me and controlling every aspect of my life, telling me what employment law has to be, telling me what contract law has to be, telling me how I can live, what I can buy, how I can buy it, when I can buy it, I don't particularly care if that tyrant is Irish, English, American, French. I'm not going to be happy. But there's this some security, which Brexit was, the European Union is bad, and you have all these people who are Eurosceptics. Wonderful. But what freedoms have the British people won back since Brexit? Zero. I'll even give you one better. What freedoms have the British people talked about getting back since Brexit? None. The only decision Brexit was, we don't want a European telling us what to do. We'll have a British person telling us what to do. Now, I'm sorry, that's not something I want to celebrate. But what frustrates me even more is when you understand the national foreign policy that France and the National Front spoke about openly. They wanted to create two new alliances. You all have NATO, and there's been Donald Trump talked about an awful lot of NATO, and you hear about, the United Nations. Well, France and the National Front want to create two new bodies. They want a pan-European Union to include Switzerland and Russia. And they also want a creation of a trilateral alliance between France, Germany, and Russia. Now, is there anyone who thinks, the National Front getting into bed with Russia is a good thing, and that is going to suit American interests? Does that sound like something that, would be good? Russia is not your friend. Russia has never been your friend. It wasn't your friend in World War II. It was your sworn enemy during the Taunt and the Cold War, and to this day is still your enemy. But yet there's this lax attitude towards it. These people are not good people. They do not share your values. They do not speak about rights coming from the Creator. They do not speak about limits on government. They do not speak about limited government and fiscal conservatism. They just speak about something you share in common on immigration. They don't want any illegal immigration. That is pretty much where the similarities end. But yet you're listening to them. You have them over at CPAC talking to you and sharing their views. I find it very frustrating.
We've only got a few seconds left. I want to talk a little bit more about that, but also get into the gun control issue that's been going on. I know you are very aware of what gun control is like and how bad it is when the government gets their hands on just the basic fundamental idea of being able to protect yourself. So we will do that right after this. Welcome back to the Blake Johnson program. You've been listening to me and Jonathon Dunne talk about just America, American ideals, American exceptionalism, and how good of a country this is. And we ended the last segment talking about CPAC and Le Pen and just the dangers of inviting someone to speak at a conference that's geared towards conservatives and conservative principles, which used to be about conserving America's founding principles that our founders put in place in the Declaration of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. But it seems like, John, more and more we as a conservative movement, you've talked about this multiple times. You've talked about consistency. You've talked about, if you're going to claim to believe in these things, well, then you've got to believe in them. You can't just, be a populist kind of group that just says what everyone else wants to hear. But it seems like more and more, at least from my end, that this conservative movement it seems like it's becoming more and more of a, hey, let's say whatever people want to hear, but let's not really talk about the real issues that are going on. I mean, we saw this during the last election. We saw people who claim to be conservative shout down people who had issues with Donald Trump and President Trump now, but his comments on health care and growing the size of government and tariffs and infrastructure and spending, we were told that if you didn't vote for Trump, you would get more spending, you would get increased illegal immigration, you wouldn't get the border wall solved, you wouldn't get all these welfare programs solved. Okay, well, I didn't vote for Trump, and we're still getting those things. So I'm like, well, where do we go from here? John, where do you see this going from here? Where should we go, and do you have any sort of idea on where we seem to be headed from here?
Sure. So I think the big difference is everyone equates conservatism and or republicanism or democraticism or liberalism, whatever ism you want to use, to their voting record. How you vote is how you vote. America, people have bought the line, whether you believe it or not, of you have a binary choice. And I have friends on all sides of the aisle, by the way, and it's the same for everyone. Everyone buys into the lesser of two evils arguments. I have liberal friends. I have someone who actually listens to my show and engages with me who was a Bernie Sanders supporter, and he voted for Hillary Clinton because I'm not having Donald Trump in office. But he didn't like Hillary Clinton. He spoke openly about, I don't like her corruption. I've never liked her. I didn't like her husband. But he was Bernie Sanders. But he voted for Hillary Clinton. Why? The lesser of two evils. Republicans do this as well. I have to vote for Donald Trump because I can't have Hillary in there because she's just Satan incarnate. Okay, how you vote is how you vote. You have that decision, and I never care how you vote. That's between you, God, and the voting booth, and who you want to talk about to tell people. What we need to understand is there's a difference. Conservatism and libertarianism is an ideology. A lot of these rules do not change. They are consistent. The laws of economics is one of my frustrating things. I talk about economics quite a bit. You have this thing of Trumponomics. Does Trumponomics works? There's no such thing as Trumponomics. The same way as there's no such thing as Obamanomics, the same thing there was no such thing as Reaganomics. It's a catchphrase. What it is the laws of economics are the same. If you follow them, they work. If you don't, they won't. It's very simple. It's like the law of gravity. I don't have John's law of gravity and you have your law of gravity. It's the same for all of us. So what we need to understand is we need to make the argument in a clear-headed, principled way, not to win an argument, but to get people to start questioning there is another path. The future for conservatism is very much up for grabs. It will either follow one of two paths. Either it will follow the traditional route where people will go, what does conservatism, the ideology, actually mean? And if you go down that path, you have a major chance of changing your country around, because that will talk about faith, it will talk about family, it will talk about freedom, it will talk about the Constitution, it will talk about nature's law. You have the Second Amendment. You want to talk about guns. Some of the solutions I have heard over the last week for your gun control problem are horrific. Not only are they horrific, they're ludicrous. And I don't use those terms lightly. I don't like insulting people. But some of the stuff that has come out from the gun control people is so ridiculous and asinine and will do absolutely nothing, and yet they still push for it. What you have to get is actually have conversations where it's not politics, it's not the media. They have their place, go away. But conversations like me and you are doing, and trying and have a conversation where it's not if you say something that I don't like, that I boo you, like they did the other night, that mob mentality at that town hall debate. But we actually have a conversation one-to-one and understand on both sides, because left and right do this, that you know what? At the end of our conversation, we accept that one of the outcomes might be we will have to agree to disagree, and we can part friends. It doesn't have to be a slagging match. It doesn't have to be an insult. It's okay. You see things that way. I see things this way. Nice talking to you. I enjoyed our debate. No one wants to do that anymore, and that's how we're losing.
It is. I mean, it really does start, like you said, with conversation. It starts with us being willing to put aside our not our principles, not what we believe in, but put aside our differences, find a way to come together, find a way to find solutions. And, like you said, sometimes we may not find a perfect solution. We may not even find a solution right there and then. But if we don't even have the conversation, well, then we're never going to get anywhere. We're just going to be at each other's throats. The divide between Americans will continue to grow, and this country will experience more and more, not only division, but it'll experience more and more of these things that are just tearing us apart and are further sending us on a path that leads, farther away from our founding principles. And, I'd have conversations with friends of mine who are for gun control. One of them is pretty reasonable, and, we talked about how, look, I mean, we may not agree on all of the specifics, but there has to be some way that we can come together and find common ground. Others is like, you know what, shut down the NRA, take away all guns. I mean, you heard it in the town hall the other night. They were cheering for gun confiscation, and any time you would ever bring up a point that was like, well, this isn't going to work, it was constant booing, constant vitriol, and constant, calling people Satan, people of the devil, because you don't want to confiscate every single weapon. Well, we've seen what happens to nations that do that. I mean, and it's just... It's frustrating to look at all of this, to look at social media, to look at all of the division and hate that keeps growing in this nation, and sometimes I just throw up my hands like, how do we survive this?
The biggest thing I think you need to do, first of all, on the gun debate is it's not a gun problem; it's a heart problem. And what you see in social media is, in some ways, what you're going through right now is entirely consistent. And what I mean by that is, so I'm not taken out of context, is that right now, one of your founding principles, it's the first right that your founder said in the Declaration of Independence, comes from your creator, right to life. Is life precious? Is life absolutely something that should be celebrated regardless? Or is some life disposable? Is it not unique? Is it just, it's just another thing? Right now, you're living in a culture where life is not precious. You have both sides of the party going, you know what, they're the opposite, they're the enemy. I'm not celebrating their lives, they're a Democrat. I'm not celebrating their lives, they're a Republican. You have this enemy mentality where if you dare see things the other way, we pretty much want to kill you. or maybe not kill you, but we don't care if you have problems. I'm sure you saw the really sad story of this. I think it was when it was actually the shooting. You had this father going around in his I think it was like a big Jeep or something, or a big SUV, and he's like looking for his daughter, I think it was, and you see this picture. He's like, "Have you seen my daughter? Have you seen my daughter?" And the outrage to him was the fact he dare be taking a picture of him in a Trump 2020 T-shirt, and everyone's like, "Well, you deserve what you get, and it's nice to see, you're the president you support. It's his policies and stuff." And I'm like, have you no compassion? Have you no reason? We don't celebrate life as precious anymore. You cannot say you celebrate life when you have a fact of, you have abortion ongoing. You have abortion. So many people are being aborted. So many babies have been aborted, and especially in communities that are not, the politically correct way to probably say this, is not white. You have them in the poorest areas. There'll be more black people, which I always find ironic. People say, when you remember when Obama was in office, "Oh, John, you're such a racist." I'm like, let's follow that through to its conclusion. If I had my way, there'd be more black people living in America right now. You have your way, yet I'm the racist. Just think, this is the logic you're dealing with, or the lack of logic that we're dealing with. So we need to be honest and have this conversation with people. But we need to understand one fundamental thing. All life matters, and all life is precious. Because I don't know about you, or your listeners, I'm a Christian. So I believe life is a direct gift from God, and you have that opportunity, and we have to reach out for it and respect it. We don't respect that life anymore in our day-to-day business. You're just the enemy. I beat you in an argument. So naturally, at some point, it's going to go, life is dehumanized. Then what's the difference between going and just going killing all the people? Because you have people on social media going, did you see this story, by the way, about CPAC? A load of kids went to it and said, "Oh, I wonder if I can get near Mike Pence and punch him."
Oh my gosh!
That was a story that came out this week, and you're like, "Yeah." I first of all, I'd love to see them try a bunch of kids with the Secret Service, but it's like you just because you have. But it's like, have you no compassion? Just because you don't like him, you wish you could punch him. Like, if this is the thinking that we have, it's really incredible. I always go back to my childhood. If I came home one day and my parents said, "What's wrong with you?" and because I was upset, and I'm like, "Well, that other guy, he doesn't agree with me on something." They'd be like, "Okay, and don't get upset about it. People have a right to their opinion. Suck it up, Buttercup." That's what my parents would say. Whereas now it's like, well, he has a different opinion to me. I have to destroy him. He's the enemy. He's Voldemort. I must kill him. No, he has a different opinion to you. Let's have a debate, and if we agree to disagree, fine.
Absolutely, John. I want to thank you so much for stopping by, taking time out of your day to join us on the program. It really is a pleasure to talk to you, and just to talk about things that really truly matter. I feel like we spend so much time focusing on things that are so trivial, but we have to find a way to cut through all of that, get to the heart of the matter, and really talk about the principles and the things that can really help make this country great again. No pun intended. But thank you, John, for being a part of the show. Again, if you all want to check out his podcast, just go to theblaze.com/radio, check out The Freedom's Disciple, and be sure to listen to that. Thank you, John, for being on the show today.
Absolutely, and thanks for having me on. I'll just say one last thing, because you're part of the big future for America. I know a lot of people talk down to you and insult you because of your age. Don't listen to them. You have a major opportunity to keep speaking out. Never let people get you down. I'm a big supporter. I'm a friend of yours as well. So just keep doing what you're doing. Keep being that voice, because you know what? As Reagan used to say, and I'll finish with this quote: "If not you, who? If not now, when?" Never ever give up, and keep being a voice for liberty, my brother.
Well, on that note, we will be right back on the Blake Johnson program. Thank you, John, and stay with us. We'll be right back in just a moment. Thanks, everyone, really do appreciate it if you enjoyed that conversation with Jonathon. We'll have to have him back on the program to talk more about just the principles that surrounded this country. Notice I use the past tense. Hopefully we can regain those principles once again. They are truly important. If you want to follow me, you can go to Twitter, and it's at LibertyVille93. You just follow me on there. You can also give more of these episodes a listen by going to Spreaker.com, or you can go to iTunes or iHeartRadio. But Spreaker, I found, is the one that people mainly use, and just search for Lanterns Radio Network, and you'll find my show up there. And you can just download it and stream them for free, totally free, no cost to you whatsoever. Or you can subscribe on iTunes or iHeart at Lanterns Radio Network. And follow us, too, on our website at lanterns.buzz. Check out the news content that we share. Hopefully that will be an encouragement to you. So, we will see you back here next Monday. Same time, same place. I want to thank you so much for listening, and I hope you will share this with your friends. Until then, God bless.